Don't cry for no hipster. He knew what he signed up for. The look and the feel, that run-down appeal. The passing ship, the distant shore. Nah, don't cry for no hipster. He saw the writing on the wall. And it gave him hope. Just another slippery slope. A deeper truth he can't recall. And when young becomes old, cool turns to cold. That's when we'll see if the truth set him free. Until then, don't cry for no hipster. He had his day, he had his night. Let's call it what it is. In a life like his, it's usually wrongs that make it right. He'll say, I'm tired of being so hip. It's like waiting for a ship. A ship that don't never come in. But check out his grin. Don't cry for him. No, don't cry for no hipster. He's got his hat and he's got his cane. And in a world so square, with disasters everywhere, if you can't laugh at life, you're through. But if you have to cry, if you have to cry, then make it tears of joy, because he's here and then he's gone, and gone is one thing he can do. Don't cry for no hipster. Thank you. Thanks for your indulgence. That was an original composition, Don't Cry for No Hipster. Obviously, it's a nostalgic look at a life and a time and an approach that's very dear to my heart and very much central to the jazz experience as we know it. And I wrote it about a year ago by accident. It kind of wrote itself. It's maybe my 320th original song, which means that I've been compulsively writing songs despite my best efforts for 40 years. I thought maybe it'd be a good way to lead off this session because I know most of you are in the music business as performers and want to get involved in the music industry as such. And so the long and the short of it is, the good news is that the future of the music business is bright. It really is. I mean, because of the internet, there are a lot of ways of getting paid now. And you will get paid. You'll get paid directly. Every couple of weeks, there'll be a deposit into your bank account from iTunes. As opposed to, well, for example, I made a record in 1971 for Capitol Records. It was called Feel Your Groove. There was a song on it called About Love, just a little throwaway groove with Jim Keltner and Willie Ruff was playing upright bass, a little hipster groove that for some reason about 15 years ago started being played in England. There's a DJ there named Giles somebody or other. Giles Peterson, who picked it up and started playing it. Now and it got on all these compilations and everything. And of course, I never saw a dime, so about a year and a half ago, I started trying to contact Capitol Records to see if I could get an accounting for this song About Love, because the original underlying album was cut out maybe 40 years ago. And, you know, in the interim, Capitol was sold 2 or 3 times. It's not part of Universal Music, but for a while it was part of some waste management company. Some billionaire bought it and sold it and bought it and sold it. So the long and the short of it is, you know, 45 years later, I have not seen an accounting on that song. But if I sold a song on YouTube yesterday, I'll get paid in 2 weeks. So that's what I mean when I say the future is bright. And also the future is bright because, I mean, you're here. You're at the New School and you're studying jazz, and you have available to you this incredible body of information, namely the jazz repertoire. It's available to you. They will parse it for you. They will tell you how it goes. They will show you what Bird did. They will show you what Train did. They will unravel the mysteries of giant steps for you. I'm old enough, so when I started playing this music when I was a kid, first of all, they didn't teach jazz anywhere. What I mean by anywhere, I mean anywhere. If you went to a university that had a great music program, like Indiana, for example, they wouldn't teach jazz. Jazz was, they wouldn't let you play a piano like this. I mean, literally, if they had a nice Steinway and a beat-up piano, if you were going to play jazz, you had to play it on the beat-up piano. It wasn't, I don't really know if they were afraid you were going to hurt their piano or if they just wanted to make the statement. But that's a fact. So the way I learned the music was listening to the records and trying to get next to people who played it. And it was a lot like what I'm talking about now in the 50s. My memory of it was that, you know, you heard a Horace Silver record or you heard a Bud Powell record, and it was like listening to a foreign language, really. And your job was to try to parse that language on your own. And so, of course, a lot of confusion entered into the process. I mean, imagine a brick wall 40 feet high, and on one side they're speaking this unknown language, and the other side you're standing there saying, I can almost understand it if I listen to that song one more time. Oh man, if I just listen to that track one more time, I'll get it. So obviously a lot of what I got was incorrect. My technique is incorrect. A lot of my understanding is incorrect, but that was typical. And that's also where a lot of what's known as style comes from. Because over the years, that's how people learned jazz historically. You historically learned it as part of an oral tradition. If you really wanted to understand what somebody was doing, you had to hang around and hear them. And jazz was kind of secret information for a long time as well. You know, there were a lot of musicians back in the day. Trumpet players, for example, would put a napkin or something over their hand so you couldn't see how they fingered stuff. I mean, it was like, it wasn't necessarily out in the open. But today, here you are, man. You have this fantastic ability to get it all and to get it right and to know exactly what it is. So you get the best of what Phil Woods, the great saxophone player, refers to as the jazz warriors, the tradition of jazz warriors. Those guys who rode buses, who struggled, who would ride a bus for 9 hours and play for 4 hours and get back on the bus. That tradition, the best of it is now available to you. So you have a really bright future. But while the future is bright, sadly, the past is becoming dim. And the past of jazz is pretty important. And it's starting to fade a little bit. And it's fading for a lot of reasons, and I hope to just go into some of them while I'm here to make you aware that every one of you individually has the responsibility to go back and participate, not just read about it, participate in what the past, the historical tradition of jazz is about and was about, because that's what we're losing. We're losing. I mean, I'm not suggesting that everybody get on a bus and ride for 9 hours and play a gig in North Dakota and get back on the bus. That's not necessary. What is necessary is understanding what put people on that bus in the first place. Why would somebody get on that bus? What was that? When I first got my jazz record at age 13 for my bar mitzvah, somebody gave me Horace Silver's 6 Pieces of Silver, and I put that on, and I heard Blue Mitchell. That was it. That 6 Pieces? Then it was Silver's. What was the one where he does Juicy Lucy? Finger Poppin'. Thank you. Thank you. I heard blues solo on Finger Poppin'. On Juicy Lucy. Right? And I heard that, and I heard it over and over and over again. You know, that was one of those things where I kept listening to it thinking if I hear it one more time, maybe I'll understand what he's doing, maybe I'll understand it. And eventually I thought to myself that I was related to Blue Mitchell, like in some weird way. And then when, of course, I found out that Blue and all the cats in the band were black, I realized that black was just a color, that racism really, in a profound way, is impossible because there's the human race, and everything else is local color. I mean, that just came to me as a natural consequence of hearing this music. So the music, to me, was a lot more than just learning to play a tune or understanding changes or stuff, although that was really important. How did jazz save my life? Well, okay, so it gave me something to count on. My father, I'm really going to go long here, why not? My father was born in Poland, and he got out of Poland at the last minute, and he came to the United States, and he settled in the small town in Iowa with his parents, and then he eventually got to Chicago, and he entered this intellectual scene. Sal Bello was in this scene. It was in Humboldt Park in Chicago. And these were like deep guys. They had come to this country. They didn't he spoke Yiddish, you know, and Polish. He didn't speak English, and he was thrown into the mix. And pretty soon all these guys, they were digging Chicago music. I mean, they were digging the Austin High Gang. They were digging the literature. They were digging the street culture of America. They weren't involved in the money side of it at all, in the business side. As a matter of fact, their dreams were played out at the Arlington racetrack more than at the stock market. And so what was passed on to me as a kid at 13, I had a bar mitzvah, and they tried to, I think, imply that that had something to do with my spiritual well-being or growth, but I didn't feel it and I didn't know it. But when I heard Blue Mitchell, I felt it and I knew it. I knew that there was something here that, number one, I was not alone in the world, right? Number two, that I was part, when I said not alone, and I think this is a profound aspect of what jazz has always been historically. I had the sense of being part of something important, something historical, that had a lot of meaning to my past and my future, and my challenge was to somehow figure it out. Again, you guys have the advantage of having a syllabus that will tell you the aspects of it. But what it won't tell you is what it means to you. That's what you have to find out. Why, you know, originally, well, originally jazz was a verb, of course. It meant fucking. Subsequently, it became a verb non grata. People like Mingus and various other players from the 40s on said, don't call me a jazz musician. I'm a musician. I'm an American musician. Jazz is a curious word. But quite clearly, it is, I think, America's greatest gift to the world with jazz and everything that came through jazz, which includes the Great American Songbook, for example. It includes George Gershwin and Harold Arlen. It includes all this wealth of popular culture. It's the greatest thing, and it's the one thing that the Chinese can't do cheaper. They can't do it at all, you know. I believe that. I do believe that. I believe that if you're involved in jazz music, you're involved in something that should be able to make you a living, that you are involved in something that has an economic future. Maybe not just as a player, though. You have to look at this as something much larger than an opportunity to put a horn in your mouth. The jazz life, in a way, the idea of finding your own voice, the idea of improvising, the idea of being connected to this very rich tradition is something that you can use no matter what you do, and you're going to have to. So, again, I digress, but you talked about how did jazz save my life. So jazz saved my life when it gave me a sense of meaning in the early 60s when a lot of the sense of meaning had fallen out, had fallen apart. And like a lot of young people in the 60s, I got to university. There was an anti-war movement. I started smoking pot and taking LSD and getting as high as I could and trying to find musicians and hanging with them. And my college career went down the toilet, and I didn't know what to do, and the Army was trying to draft me, and I didn't know what it was all for or what it was all about or what I was supposed to do in this mix, in this soup. And it was the music that saved me. It was Horace Silver that saved me in the sense of it was Mose Allison's lyrics that saved me. It was Bud Powell that saved me. It was Miles that saved me, and Train that saved me because they actually told me in no uncertain terms that there was something bigger than me that was important to me that I was part of. And you know, when you think about it, and I've had a lot of time to think about this, music is not trivial. In Western society, we tend to think of music as trivial. You know, the question always is, well, is it the frosting or the cake, right? Do we have enough resources to do the arts? And to me, it's a badly put question. I don't think that the arts are frosting or the cake. I think the arts are the appetite. When you wake up in the morning, what gets you through the day, particularly as you get older? You know, what makes it worthwhile for you to go through the assault of your daily life? Because it is an assault. This is not easy out here. Nobody said it was going to be, and it isn't. To me, that's what the arts are about. The arts are the appetite for life. You get up and you do this. Well, this can't be a new thing. And I was really taken several months ago when I read, you know, the caves in France, the Lascaux caves with the great paintings of the animals on the wall, 40,000 years ago. They also found in the Lascaux caves flutes made from the bones of vultures. But the amazing thing is that the flutes were pentatonically tuned. There was a perfect pentatonic scale in the flutes from Lascaux. Well, now, if you go back 40,000 years, you're going back before organized language, before grammar. So when you think about this, you got a place, a magical place, where they're painting on the wall There are no lights in there. There had to have been fires and smoke. And they're playing music, and they've clearly got percussion, and they've got melody, and it's organized, and they don't necessarily have grammar, as we think of grammar. So just for a minute, consider that. Music is not about frosting of the cake. Music is the way people have historically come together to realize, as Mel Brooks once said, there's something bigger than Bernie out here. You know, there's something important out here, and we're part of it. And I'll tell you what, as you get older, this becomes more and more important, because when you start out, you know, you're really hungry to make it, to get that girl, to get that gig, to have your friends respect you, all that stuff. It's very personally oriented. It's all about you and trying to survive. But as you get a little older and you become part of the process, you realize that actually all of us, I mean, think of it as like we're all notes. We're all different. We're literally different. No two of us are the same. Could be snowflakes, whatever it is. But at the same time, we literally all come from the same mother. If you go back 250 million years, you can trace it back to one, some people say two, some people say four, but women in the Rift Valley in Africa. Our DNA, every one of us, goes back there. We're related. We're literally related. It's kind of spooky, man. 6 billion of us on this planet are distantly related. And so we are literally part of something bigger. And that's important. Like I say, think of yourself as a note. By yourself, you can be a beautiful note, but you're a note. But together, we start to operate like a composition. People need to be part of something bigger, right? Together, we're a symphony, we're a composition, we're something meaningful. We're not just a voice in the wilderness. And this goes back to the search for meaning. Like, we all want to know why we're here. Why are you here? Why are you studying music? Why do you want to do this? You know, well, any answer is the right answer. There's not a right answer. Maybe you're here because you think there's a lot of money in the music business. Maybe there is for you, right? That's not a wrong answer. But what it is an answer that on the face of it ignores the importance of being part of something larger than yourself. This is the basis of all spiritual traditions in the world. It doesn't matter which one it is. And that is, the Buddhists call it compassion. The Jews call it tikkun olam, healing the world. You couldn't go. You couldn't learn the music. So I, starting in the 60s, tried to get next to people and try to find out who they were. I found that the most interesting way to understand what jazz was about was watching a jazz musician try to get paid at the end of a night. Huh? Watch them trying to get paid. So you're in a club, it's a hip club, everything's great, everything's fine, everybody's cool. Now you're hanging around, now it's like 1:32 in the morning, everybody's gone, and the cat is sitting at the bar, and he's waiting, right? I can't tell you the number of times that somehow the owner has disappeared. He got a phone call, he'll straighten you out tomorrow, right? Well, not just what does that mean to your bank book and to your obligations to the other musicians in the band, but what does that say to you as a human being who has to compete out here in the world about your personal worth? How do you absorb a shock like that and then get on the stage the next day and expose yourself to a bunch of strangers and tell them your deepest secrets? You know, it's a very interesting life. But of course, as I say, the future's bright. The future's bright because you're going to get paid. But are you going to be able to connect with this powerful tradition that if you're able to tell a story on your instrument, you're part of it? Now, telling a story isn't about how cool you can run the changes. And Ben Webster was a great example of that, you know. And Miles Davis was a great example of that. Miles personally couldn't play as fast as Dizzy or at the range of Roy Eldridge. So as Gil Evans said, he reinvented the horn. He threw out the whole idea of the vibrato. He played in the middle range. He invented something that was later called cool. And he played these beautiful notes. And when asked about those notes, hey, Miles, how come nobody can sound like you? He said, I don't know, man. He said, your sound, it's like your sweat. It's like your sweat. What about those beautiful notes that you played? Oh, man, those are just major notes that should be played. What about kind of blue, Miles? What about how revolutionary it was? Did it surprise you that it was so, it's the most popular jazz record ever made? No, man, it's, we were just leaning that way. You know, Bill Evans, and we were just leaning that way. So this music is not necessarily about parsing the facts, but being immersed in the process, being present tense. It's why when you study jazz, what you're really doing is you're studying being in the moment you're in. Because if you're concerned about the thing you just played, I mean, like when I played my little tune, I wrote that tune. I fucked it up for you. Okay, it happens. It happens.
But when you write the tune, they don't know if you mess it up. That's the beauty, right?
Well, maybe, or maybe they did. You know, I mean, Jimmy's out there. He's got a big, maybe he heard, man, that fucking change is wrong. Well, now you're, as Art Blakey once said, that's how jazz was born. Somebody goofed. Your job, if you do something you didn't intend, is to make something out of it and make it work, to stay in that moment, to not bail on the present tense, to not bail on the present tense, you know. Important takeaways maybe, number one, this idea of storytelling and narrative and how it goes back to the very beginning of who we are as animals on this planet. It's very easy for us to forget. We're just animals on this planet, man. We share it with a lot of other animals that we're putting into extinction. But we're just some hip animals that came along. And we're on this rock floating through space in the middle of nowhere, and there might not be another place like it. So we got here, we're lucky, and then there's music? Oh my God. You know, what a great thing that is. How do we relate to that? How do we take that personally? How do we make that part of who we are? How do we share that? And how do we honor, to continue to honor those who came before us and those who are with us as our compatriots and those who will come after us? What is it that storytelling? Don't lose sight of this idea of narrative. Narrative not just in music, but narrative as a greater part of the human experience. It's a very important thing. It's the reason, you know, when you think about this idea of monotheism, and again, I digress, but the greatest story ever told, they say, was the story in the Torah, in the Bible. And what's the story about? Well, if you read the Torah, what the story is about, 80% of it is, I am the Lord your God, and don't you fucking forget it. And if you do, I'm going to come down there, I'm going to kick your ass. That's what really most of the Bible's about. Now, there's a lot of other stuff, but basically it's clear that at the time it was written, a lot of people didn't agree with that sentiment, and so that's why it was so important to write it. If everybody believed it, you wouldn't have to write it. So what it was an attempt, and again, remember, this was an oral thing. It was not written down. It was an attempt by a group of people to say, look, my God's stronger than your God, and you have to buy my narrative, and here's my narrative. And at the time of that narrative, there were a lot of other narratives. This happened at a time 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in Sumeria, in the city of Ur. I mean, this is all historical, man. I'm not making it up. Where they had a bunch of gods. They had a sun god and a rain god and all this stuff, and they'd sacrifice virgins to these gods. And I like to think that at the bottom of this huge edifice where they threw the virgins into the fire, there were a bunch of cats hanging out. Because there's been musicians forever. You know, I mean, there were musicians 40,000 years ago when you had the pentatonic flute. There were cats sitting down there, man. There were musicians gigging, working guys.
It's a pretty rough gig.
It's a rough gig. They're saying, man, did you hear what just happened to Jezebel? No, man, they threw her. They threw her in there? Man, did they have the wrong chick? You know, she's not a virgin. I know that. You know that. You know, what I'm saying is that there have been cats forever hanging out, playing music. It seems like another world back then. They weren't that different than us. If you or any of us went back there, we'd fit in perfectly, right? We would. We'd pass. We'd pass in Samaria. And suddenly, in the midst of this craziness that was normal in this part of the world, there was this narrative, there was this story about a guy. Later on, his name became Abraham, but the story is he's an average guy, an ordinary guy. He goes for a walk in the desert, he hears a voice. Today, oral hallucination, clearly, right? Back then, he was, what did they call him? A prophet. And so monotheism, there's only one God. Now there's not a bunch of gods, there's one God. Why was that such an important part of the story? Very simple. Here's a little geometric proof. If there's only one God, and all of us have the same potential relationship to that one God, it totally strips the middlemen out of the picture. The middlemen were making all the money. Who was making the money back there in Samaria? The priests who were throwing Jezebel into the fire. They made all the money. If you wanted good luck for your crops, you came and you gave them what in the record business was called a $50 handshake. You gave them a couple of free sheep, right? It's been the same way since the beginning. Nothing has changed. So this idea that there's only one God, why is that important? Well, look, man, if there's only one God, that means I have a relationship with the God, you have the relationship with God, A equals C, B equals C, A equals B, social justice. Suddenly, there's a format for the idea that people are equal, that there's social justice. That's why that story is the greatest story ever told. Because at its base, it says, now wait a minute, I don't know who got here first, but we're all here now, and we're equal. That was at the heart of the great monotheistic religions. Of course, subsequently, millions of people have been slaughtered over various interpretations. You know, consider the monotheistic religions include Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. I do want to point out, as a Jew, that in the world today, there are only 15 million Jews. In the world, there are more Finns than Jews. There are more Seventh-day Adventists than Jews. There are billions of Muslims. There are billions of Christians. There are only 15 million Jews. Consider that. And consider the importance of the Jewish people when it comes to the development of the Great American Songbook, when it comes to the development of the entire recording industry, of which you guys are going to be part of. The whole business. There's some very interesting connections that I believe go back to this idea of storytelling, narrative, with the Jewish people in popular culture. I'm just saying.
So this is an interesting moment that maybe, because I wanted to ask you about this, which is, this is the big picture, but let's take it back down to the specific picture of you as a young guy in middle America and hearing black music, African American music. Did you, as a Jew, also feeling as a minority and an outsider in that context, was that a way in for you? And then, pursuant to that, there's a story that you tell in your book, which I recommend to everybody, A Life in the Music. It's a fantastic book about Ben's life, about how Louis Armstrong was raised mostly by a Jewish family. And you said that his vocal style was in some way based on imitation of what's known as davening, which is where the pious Jews are almost in like a trance. So this idea that it wasn't just the black music, there was a place for Jews in there too, and thereby maybe all of America. I'd love to hear more about that, because it's amazing to me how you found your way in and became one of the cats.
Well, I like to say I lived my entire professional life avoiding two things. One of them was boxes of CDs in my basement. I never wanted to be that guy. And number two were the organized Jews. When I was bar mitzvahed at age 13, I left the synagogue and never went back. only to wind up with boxes of Jewish CDs in my basement. So I'm here to tell you, you can't always get what you want, but you might get what you need. Absolutely, your point is right when it comes to me. When I heard that music, I believe that to some extent, you know, keep in mind, you know, I was born in 1943. World War II didn't end until a couple of years after that. And then it was another 10 years before we all found out what the Holocaust was really about. The Holocaust, I mean, people knew something was going on over there, but the depth of what had happened really wasn't known until the 50s. And as it became known, you know, if you were raised in a Jewish family, you would hear a lot about, you know, they wouldn't say it in front of the kids, but it was like ghost stories. So something's happening, what's happening, what's happening. So you knew that you were part of a hunted population. I guess that's the best way to put it. I felt hunted. I felt hunted. And I did have a friend when I was, I guess it must have been 4th or 5th grade, my best friend, who did say to me, Ben, you know, we know each other well now. You can tell me, do Jews use the blood of Christian babies in their services? And he was my little pal. And of course, I was destroyed. You know, how could you think that? And to this day, I wish I would have said yes. But yes, I think being a Jew, and historically it's true also, you know, when the Jews came to the United States, the big period of immigration was 1880s to the 1920s. And during that period, 2 million Jews came from the Pale of Settlement, which was Eastern Europe. And these were dirt poor people. These were not the rich Jews or Jews who were part of the greater German population. These were people who were mystical, crazy intellects who had, you know, they weren't farmers even because they weren't allowed to own farms. What they did is, you know, they came to the United States and they got involved in what was called the needle trades, you know, clothing, because back in the Pale of Settlement, they weren't allowed to sell new clothes, so they literally took rags and made clothes out of them. And they came to the United States, and what they found was this stew of people from all over the world living below 23rd Street. I mean, if you walked where we are now 100 years ago, chances are you wouldn't hear English spoken. You'd hear every other language, but not English. It was just people from all over the place. And I mean, historically, this is a long story, and I spent 7 years reading up on it. The book I wrote after this book is called There Was a Fire, Jews, Music, and the American Dream, and it talks about how the groups came here, and briefly what happened in the 1830s because of the great potato famine in Ireland. There was starvation, and the Irish left, and many of them came to the United States. See how and they came, and the Irish were the blacks of Europe because they were papists, you remember this, and in England there was the Reformation. So they came here, and they couldn't get jobs, and oh, there are people who are blacker than I am. So the Irish invented minstrelsy. The Christy minstrels, they invented minstrelsy. And when the Irish invented minstrelsy, basically it was to separate themselves from the African Americans so that they would be above this. They made believe that the black tradition was one of licentiousness and laziness and all this stuff. And of course that's the whole premise of what minstrelsy was in the 19th century. When the Jews came in the 1880, they found people, and the Jews when they came here were also black. They weren't white, they were thought of as black. And instead of painting African Americans as licentious, they started writing songs like Jolson sang Mammy or whatever, where they would see African Americans as being a population with a big heart and loving their family. And it was this great tragedy that the Jews participated in. The Irish identified up, the Jews identified down and up. And it's part of what the Jews, the narrative, again, I keep coming back to this. This idea of narrative is important because it provides a context at all times, wherever you are, whoever you are, to get your bearings, to get your feet on the ground. This idea of a narrative, don't ever forget, we're all part of a story we're telling ourselves. We're telling this story to ourselves over and ongoing and ongoing. And you know, memory is fallible. There are two kinds of memory the neuroscientists say. Okay, one is what they call emotional memory. That's what did it feel like when I got punched. The other one is called sequential memory or eidetic memory, which is who, what, when, where. It's invariably fallible. Tuesday at 7 o'clock, I had a hamburger. A month from now, I'm going to say, yeah, Wednesday it was around 5 o'clock, I had a cheese sandwich. Our memory morphs. Every time we remember something, it changes. But the emotional memory doesn't change, what it felt like. And so when I say narrative is important, this context of who you are, where you are, doesn't change. That stays with you. You know your cells change every 3 years. You shed the skin and you grow new skin and all the organs change. You are literally not the same person you were 5 years ago. You've changed. But your emotional memory is the same. That remains. And so this idea that when jazz and the American popular song form created a context for all of us in America to feel who we are and where we are and what's our job, that narrative, that's key. That's really a key. And when I say the past is growing dim, what I mean, again, I'm coming back to this over and over again because I think this really is the only subject today that's really important to talk about. When we equate what's important with numbers, whether it's the number of tweets or the number of dollars that are connected to it, we strip it of its emotional context. It no longer contextualizes who we are or what we are. There's an expression in semantics that says you can define a thing so you can dispense with it. I give you a name. Your name is Phil. Okay, I can put you over there now. I know you're Phil. I don't have to deal with you. Right? I don't have to deal with you as a person specifically. Now you're Phil. And I can call you, hey, Phil, what's happening, blah, 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 right? You define something and you dispense with it. It's a semantic rule of thumb. And so numbers help us to do that. Technology helps us to do that. So it becomes more and more difficult for us while we're out here to kind of stay in tune with what did it feel like? Phil Wood says, what did it feel like the first time you played a whole note and it sounded good? What did that feel like? Because I said to Phil, what's it like to play anything you can hear? I can't do that. I know Phil can. He said, man, playing's no problem. Now the problem is wanting to play, to get up in the morning and try to remember what it felt like the first time that whole note sounded good. To get up in the morning and remember why you got involved with this in the first place. Okay, so here we are in a room with people who are involved with this greatest art form ever came down the pike, jazz music, right? What did it feel like the first time you heard something that went, whoa, what is that? I'm not alone now. This is important. I mean, if you came this far, obviously some of you are here because it's a career. Some of you are here because it's the least unpleasant alternative that you got, right? Whatever it is, you're here. Something got you here. And I tend to think that this music, remember when I said it's the basis of religion is music. The basis of why people came together is spiritual, right? Doesn't matter why you're here. If you're involved with this music, you're called. Something called you. Because this music is not easy, right? This is difficult music. Even if you're able to learn the whole thing, even if you memorize everything that Bird ever played, it won't do you any good. Won't do you any good if you have to stand up there and somebody calls Cherokee. It doesn't matter what Bird played on it. Because even if you play his solo, it won't sound like anything. It won't feel like anything. We're all kind of out here adrift in this music, and we're trying to find out who we are, right? So when I talk to you in terms of spirituality or narrative or storytelling or all this stuff, I'm literally talking about jazz. Although it sounds like I'm talking about dinosaurs and all this other stuff. I'm not. I'm talking to you about what the job is out here, what we're supposed to be doing. Now, we have to try to make a living in the midst of all this. It's not enough to get involved in all this, the Jews say, mishigas, this craziness. Now we have to find a way to make a living doing it.
One of the interesting things about your career that I've appreciated is how your idea of the music as a personal music, and that, like you said, the semantic issue of if you name something, you can just kind of feel like it's defined and put it away. But what I've seen you do is avoid that and try to get to know the people, the musicians, and you ended up making a career out of that by having these wonderful radio programs that were interviewing great artists, these fantastic television programs on VH1 with artists. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you learned talking to all these people, and why it was so important to keep those personal relationships and to get that information like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I actually learned something by talking to hundreds of musicians and all that sort of thing. And what I learned is so obvious that it's just mind-blowing that you have to learn it. But what you learn is your best shot is to be yourself. That's your best shot. Going in the door, some might be your only shot. When I talked to Tony Williams, for example, about Miles working, how did Miles affect you? What effect did he have? I don't know. Well, what was the result? Well, I mean, he just let me know it was okay to go the way I wanted to go. And Miles said, oh, man, I really miss Bird and those guys, man. They really, you know, they really taught me some stuff. I said, oh, yeah, Miles, what did they teach you? He said, I don't know, you know, just said it was okay to go the way I was going. Right? That seems to be the whole of it. Be yourself. It's not easy, turns out. That is a really tough situation to be yourself. Because if you come through the education system that we all came through, where they spend all 8 hours a day trying to beat the self out of you, you know, try to get you to learn to memorize a bunch of stuff you're never going to need, or they're going to tell you some history, but they won't contextualize it and tell you why it's important to you, there's not a lot of you left, generally, you know, to be. Which is why I think that traditionally people had to run away to get involved in this music. They had to physically turn their back on normal society to become jazz players, right? To be themselves. You don't have to now. You don't have to. That's why the future is bright, but that's why the past is getting dim. It's the same process.
But how can now that jazz has come into the academy and all these young musicians are students here, and they're learning the right way to do it, the right way, how can they find themselves? Mm-hmm. Isn't it back to the same problem now, that it's school and it's a system and you're supposed to do it like an assembly line and one? What kind of advice might you be able to give?
No, that is. It's a big problem. And the evidence is in front of all of us, which is there are great players, but there's very few stylists, right? We're hearing great players everywhere, young players, piano players, horn players, brilliant, 19 years old, 17 years old, but they don't necessarily sound like themselves. Forgive me, Wynton Marsalis is an example. He's a great educator, he's a sincere, dedicated guy, but he sounds like his technique. For me, one note from Blue Mitchell, and I surrender. You know, and I don't want to, you know, knock Wynton. You know, we all got places out here to be and to do. I mean, he's made some mistakes. He really has. He and Stan Crouch have made a bunch of mistakes. But so what? The fact is that when I say Ben Webster or Blue Mitchell, you know, just saying that name, just saying Blue Mitchell, man, I get a smile, you know. I feel that connection, my brother, you know. Style is getting hard to find. So here's the thing, guys. When I say your best shot is to be yourself, I'm talking about style. I'm talking about one note and who is that guy. And you know, we're out here, and one of the problems with being in an academic situation is you tend to get competitive because you see great people all around you, and you start to judge yourself in terms of who's around you, right? You've got to get beyond that. You've got to say, man, it's so great that you play good, but here's what I'm doing. Man, I love what you're doing over there, but here's what I'm doing. I know it's little, it's nothing, it's small, you know, but that's me, and I'm going to own that. I'm going to own that mistake, because everything good that we play comes from our mistakes, not from our success, right? It's how we respond to what we think of as a mistake that's at the heart of our style, right? It's sort of like, it's not what you do, it's how you respond to what you do that makes you who you are, as a person even, right? We're all gonna fuck up, man. But how you respond to what you did determines your character. That's who you are as a person. And generally speaking, the mistakes are more profound in our lives than the successes, right? I was once on stage in Carnegie Hall. It was a tribute to Eddie Jefferson, and I was up there with Dizzy and Moody and the Manhattan Transfer and Bobby McFerrin and John Hendricks and all these people. And I have a very clear memory of being on stage at Carnegie Hall in a line with all these people and asking myself, what does this feel like right now? What do you feel like? What does it feel like? And it didn't feel like anything. And I really thought to myself, something's wrong here, man. You better check this out. You better go back and find out why this doesn't feel great, because it's not going to get any better. And if you are not happy now, you are never going to be happy. And it turns out it was because I didn't own that moment. I was lost. I was lost. I had to go back and accept the little bit of what I did that was me, that was original, and water that little plant, because that's the only thing I had. So again, this is style. This has to do with, you know, I'm not competing with anybody. I will walk up on a stage and sit in with anybody on any tune, whether I know it or not. That's it. And if I don't know it, even better. You know, I need that in order to develop as a person. So you're not competing. There's no winning. There's no losing. You want to find out who you are. And the only way to find out who you are is to put yourself at risk. Because without the possibility of failure, there is no possibility of success. And that's what they won't teach in school. Because in school, they want to teach you success is memorization. It's not. That's not it. Memorization is just a little trick that you're either good at or you're not.
So that's, I mean, thank you. I hope everybody here appreciates hearing that. And it's echoes some themes that we've heard from our guests this whole semester, actually. Ciro Baptista was here a few weeks ago, and he told a story about, who was here for the Ciro session? You remember when he told the story about playing with Herbie Hancock, and they were on the road in Eastern Europe, and after the gig they heard this little piano player that nobody was paying attention to in a bar, and he was doing some crazy stuff, and odd meter, and the next night Herbie tried to do that and didn't pull it off. And after the show, Ciro said, "Oh, you know, I heard you trying to do that. You didn't really do it. Ha ha." And Ciro told us that Herbie's reaction was he looked right at him and said, "Yeah, that's because I can't afford to be a coward in my music." And Ciro said he felt like this big, but then after that he went and started his own band and never looked back. And along this way of thinking, of finding your style, how did you get to what I think I could say is a big part of your style, is these thoughts about your Jewish heritage and the Jewish music tradition, and those boxes of Jewish CDs in your basement, Life's a Lesson? Was that part of your style path to really finding your style?
Life's Lesson that he makes reference to is a CD that I made in 1993. It was Hebrew liturgical music, just mostly folk songs, the kids' songs. They were Jewish kids' songs. If you know them, Avinu Malkeinu, Oseh Shalom, Hine Ma Tovu. I mean, these are songs that all kids who came from an Ashkenazi background knew when they were growing up. And I made this record with Lee Konitz and Randy Brecker, and Carole King was on it. Who else was on it? Minieri. Yeah. Mike Minieri. I was in this was great. I was
the one goy in the bunch, right?
No, here's the thing. No, because we were so into it by this point, you know. James Farber was the engineer. He was coming to the sessions with a yarmulke on, you know. Everybody was into this thing. And everybody said the same thing when I'd call them up. Josh Redman, I call these guys up, I say, look, man, I've got you down for a Vino Volcano. You gotta say. They say, look, man, I'm Jewish, but I'm not really Jewish. I said, look, I understand, same here, no problem. You come down, you play on the track. If you don't like it, no harm, no foul, we don't use it. Everybody came down, played on the track, and left with a cassette for their mother. Swear to God. Everybody has been searching for a way to say to them, I'm not a doctor, Mom, but look, I'm okay, I'm legitimate, it's all right. You know, this is a very Jewish guilt trip that we were all on. I got involved in this project by accident. Well, you know, here's a rule of thumb, guys. What you stumble on is always better than what you're looking for. You got to be looking for something, because you got to have a purpose out here. But just keep your eyes and ears open, because you're going to stumble on stuff that's much hipper than what, you know, because you already know what you're looking for. But the stuff out here you don't know about at all, and that could really take you somewhere you don't know about. The Jewish thing, you know, it turns out it wasn't just about Jewish music. It was about this idea, again, of history and narrative and memory. Because what really turned me on to the possibility of doing what I'm doing were songwriters and guys who, like Mose Allison or, well, you know, I'm compared a lot to Mose Allison, Dave Fishberg, Bob Dorough, blah, blah, blah. I sound a little bit like Mose. I don't sound like the rest of them at all. But I'm compared to them because of clever lyrics and this idea of telling a story over a simple song, like Mose will do it over a blues form. Fishberg will do it over a 32-bar song form. But there's no doubt about it. The idea of being able to say something that has many layers and do it simply so that somebody comes in on a Tuesday night with his girlfriend, he hears a tune, no problem. Somebody comes in on a Tuesday night and his life is about to end and he hears a tune and he hears down into it and he hears down below that and it means something, good. You know, that's what... Can I digress and tell how I got in the record business?
Of course.
Here's the story of how I got in the record business. I had no intention of being a professional musician. None. Because my mother told me when I was 12 years old, don't even think of that. You have to be a doctor or something. So I went to college and by coincidence was in a college band with two guys who became pop stars. One is Steve Miller, one is Boz Scaggs. We had a little college band. And in 1967, Steve said, hey man, I'm going out to San Francisco because the people out there can't play at all. And Steve was a good player. So he knew there was a fertile field. He said, man, you got to come out here and do this. And I said to him, no, man, I'm going to graduate school. I'm going to make something of myself. And I went to graduate school in England where I eventually got a PhD in the social history of black music in America. I studied and read and did this. And when I graduated, there were no jobs. There were no jobs because everybody had gone to graduate school to avoid going to Vietnam. And there I was. So in 1970, 71, I moved to Los Angeles to get in the record business. And because I had written this Space Cowboy song with Steve Miller and a bunch of other things, I thought, well, you know, maybe that'll help. Turns out, while the record business is a people business, or it was, now it's a number business, was a people business, it never made any difference who you knew. That was never important. People say, oh man, there are all these Jews in the business, that's hot. No, the last person who's going to help you up if you're a Jew is another Jew. So don't even think about that. That's got nothing to do with it. And similarly, you know, just because, you know, you were on this date and whatever, or you wrote this song, doesn't mean anything. You know, you got to come through that door yourself every time. But of course, I had to learn that. So I went out to LA, and I spent 6 months knocking on doors, you know, getting to know everybody's secretary, literally, becoming friends with secretaries. I was sharing a house. It's a true story. I was sharing a house with a guy who was an engineer. His name was Glyn Johns. I knew Glyn from England, and he would come in and out of Los Angeles, and he didn't want to stay at a hotel. So he said, look, man, I'll rent this house with you, so I'll have a nicer situation, and you'll have a nicer situation. It'll be fine. So we rented a house in North Hollywood, and Glyn had a bedroom there. And at one point, he was there. And I had been calling literally. I would start with A, with Atlantic Records. And by the end of the week, I'd get to W, Warner Brothers or something, and I'd go back to A again and start. You know, I didn't know what else to do. I was playing in a band with this guy, Jesse Ed Davis, this guitar player. I was in his band. Great band. Total lunatics, man. I mean, I was not long for that band. And anyway, one day, Glyn was in town from England, and he said, man, I got to go down to the Capitol Studios. I got to drop something off. Come on with me. We used to go shoot pool all the time. That's what we would do. Glyn and I would shoot pool in the valley. So we'll go shoot pool, but we're going to stop at Capitol. So we go there. He said, oh, man, I forgot. I got to go talk to this guy up on the 10th floor. Come on with me. I went up there. He had to talk to a guy named Artie Mogul, who at the time was president of Capitol Records. This is a guy I'd been trying to get on the phone for 6 months. And, of course, I wasn't even on his callback list. You know, it just didn't exist, although I did know his secretary. But this day we walked in. We said hi to Art Mogul. And Art said, hey, man, to Glyn, I'm on my way down to have lunch with someone. Come on with us. Come on with us. So Glyn and I and Art Mogul went 2 blocks down to the Brown Derby, which at the time looked like a hat. It was the old Brown Derby, where we met Albert Grossman, who was Artie's partner and friend. And we get there, and Artie was a funny guy, man. And the first thing he said is, you know, Albert, there's only one girl in the world I want to fuck anymore. Albert said, what? Who's that? Artie said, the Queen of England. Albert said, Queen of England, she's a dog. Why would you want to fuck her? Artie said, well, because I want to hear the Queen of England say, give it to me, Artie, give it to me. Fall down, funny, crazy. It was a people business. It was about guys hanging out. And the next time I called Artie Mogul, he took my call. He took my call. That's how I got in the record business. He took my call. He said, come on in here. I came in. He said, so you want to make a record? I said, yep. He said, tell me about the record you want to make. He had my demos and everything. I had the Rolling Stones. I had Eric Clapton on my demo. Didn't matter. He didn't listen to it. Tell me about the record. Well, I'm going to make this record. See, I like jazz. I like blues. I like funk. This was before what they ultimately called fusion music. I was just coming from a point of view of K-San radio, you know, where you can put James Brown and Pharoah Sanders on a track. That's what I'm thinking, you know.
What year was this?
1971. I said, okay, so I got these tunes, and I'm going to use jazz guys and blues guys and funk guys, and of course I don't sing, so I'm going to get Steve Miller and Boz Scaggs. Hold it right there, he said. He said, we're doing singer-songwriters. I went, oh, yeah, of course I can sing. Oh, yeah. I never sang in my life. Never in my life. Why? Because I came up with these guys who were great singers, and I'm not a great singer. I sing like a piano player. But the first thing I learned was say yes. I said, yes, of course I can sing. He said, okay, great. Take this piece of paper down the hall. You're signed, right? I went down there. I'm signed. Now, I'm in the studio. I got Boz. I got Jesse Davis. I got all my pals around me. We're going to produce this thing. And here's a $5,000 Neumann mic right in front of my face. First time I ever saw one like that. I had earphones on. I started to sing the first song. I got like 12 seconds into it, ripped the phones off, and stood back. Because what I heard in my head was my father's voice. I had never heard my voice in my head before. It freaked me out completely. So that's the start of me as an artist. That's where I came from. Just total panic and not knowing. So I had to invent this thing that I've been selling now for 45 years. That's an invention. It's not a lie. It's a small part of who I am that I'm able to feel comfortable with on stage and on records that I can market. Right? Y'all faced with this. Y'all faced with this. There's got to be something that you do that's different than what anybody else does. You're not better than them. You're not worse than them. You're different than them. And what you are selling is that difference. you got to learn to love that difference. You got to embrace that. You got to be that. And one of the things that I found out about 10 years into it, it was before rap, man. There was no rap music back then. What I loved was talking on top of a groove. And the first time I discovered it was this groove. PhD in the social history of black music in America. I studied and read and did this. And when I graduated, there were no jobs. There were no jobs because everybody had gone to graduate school to avoid going to Vietnam. And there I was. So in 1970, 71, I moved to Los Angeles to get in the record business. And because I had written the Space Cowboy song with Steve Miller and a bunch of other things, I thought, well, you know, maybe that'll help. Turns out, while the record business is a people business, or it was, now it's a number business, was a people business, it never made any difference who you knew. That was never important. People say, oh man, there are all these Jews in the business, that's hot. No, the last person who's going to help you up if you're a Jew is another Jew. So don't even think about that. That's got nothing to do with it. And similarly, you know, just because, you know, you were on this date and whatever, or you wrote this song, doesn't mean anything. You know, you got to come through that door yourself every time. But of course, I had to learn that. So I went out to LA, and I spent 6 months knocking on doors, you know, getting to know everybody's secretary, literally, becoming friends with secretaries. I was sharing a house. It's a true story. I was sharing a house with a guy who was an engineer. His name was Glyn Johns. I knew Glyn from England, and he would come in and out of Los Angeles, and he didn't want to stay at a hotel. So he said, look, man, I'll rent this house with you, so I'll have a nicer situation, and you'll have a nicer situation. It'll be fine. So we rented a house in North Hollywood, and Glyn had a bedroom there. And at one point, he was there. And I had been calling literally. I would start with A, with Atlantic Records. And by the end of the week, I'd get to W, Warner Brothers or something, and I'd go back to A again and start. You know, I didn't know what else to do. I was playing in a band with this guy, Jesse Ed Davis, this guitar player. I was in his band. Great band. Total lunatics, man. I mean, I was not long for that band. And anyway, one day, Glyn was in town from England, and he said, man, I got to go down to the Capitol Studios. I got to drop something off. Come on with me. We used to go shoot pool all the time. That's what we would do. Glyn and I would shoot pool in the valley. So we'll go shoot pool, but we're going to stop at Capitol. So we go there, and he said, oh, man, I forgot. I got to go talk to this guy up on the 10th floor. Come on with me. I went up there. He had to talk to a guy named Artie Mogul, who at the time was president of Capitol Records. This is a guy I'd been trying to get on the phone for 6 months, and, of course, I wasn't even on his callback list. You know, it just didn't exist, although I did know his secretary. But this day, we walked in. We said hi to Art Mogul, and Art said, hey, man, to Glyn, I'm on my way down to have lunch with someone. Come on with us. Come on with us. So Glyn and I and Art Mogul went 2 blocks down to the Brown Derby, which at the time looked like a hat. It was the old Brown Derby, where we met Albert Grossman, who was Artie's partner and friend. And we get there, and Artie was a funny guy, man. And the first thing he said is, you know, Albert, there's only one girl in the world I want to fuck anymore. Albert said, what? Who's that? Artie said, the Queen of England. Albert said, Queen of England, she's a dog. Why would you want to fuck her? Artie said, well, because I want to hear the Queen of England say, give it to me, Artie, give it to me. Fall down, funny, crazy. It was a people business. It was about guys hanging out. And the next time I called Artie Mogul, he took my call. He took my call. That's how I got in the record business. He took my call. He said, come on in here. I came in. He said, so you want to make a record? I said, yep. He said, tell me about the record you want to make. He had my demos and everything. I had the Rolling Stones. I had Eric Clapton on my demo. Didn't matter. He didn't listen to it. Tell me about the record. Well, I'm going to make this record. See, I like jazz. I like blues. I like funk. This was before what they ultimately called fusion music. I was just coming from a point of view of K-San radio, you know, where you can put James Brown and Pharoah Sanders on a track. That's what I'm thinking, you know.
What year was this?
1971. I said, okay, so I got these tunes, and I'm going to use jazz guys and blues guys and funk guys, and of course I don't sing, so I'm going to get Steve Miller and Boz Scaggs. Hold it right there, he said. He said, we're doing singer-songwriters. I went, oh yeah, of course I can sing. Oh, yeah. I never sang in my life. Never in my life. Why? Because I came up with these guys who were great singers, and I'm not a great singer. I sing like a piano player. But the first thing I learned was say yes. I said, yes, of course I can sing. He said, okay, great. Take this piece of paper down the hall. You're signed, right? I went down there. I'm signed. Now, I'm in the studio. I got Boz. I got Jesse Davis. I got all my pals around me. We're going to produce this thing. And here's a $5,000 Neumann mic right in front of my face. First time I ever saw one like that. I had earphones on. I started to sing the first song. I got like 12 seconds into it, ripped the phones off, and stood back. Because what I heard in my head was my father's voice. I had never heard my voice in my head before. It freaked me out completely. So that's the start of me as an artist. That's where I came from. Just total panic and not knowing. So I had to invent this thing that I've been selling now for 45 years. That's an invention. It's not a lie, but it's a small part of who I am that I'm able to feel comfortable with on stage and on records that I can market. Right? Y'all faced with this. Y'all faced with this. There's got to be something that you do that's different than what anybody else does. You're not better than them. You're not worse than them. You're different than them. And what you are selling is that difference. You've got to learn to love that difference. You've got to embrace that. You've got to be that. And one of the things that I found out about 10 years into it, it was before rap, man. There was no rap music back then. What I loved was talking on top of a groove. And the first time I discovered it was this groove. This is a story about a young man, his true love was blind. He was crying all the time, thought maybe he could find a new love back down in Paris, France. He's gonna do the Paris dance, but when he got to town, all he found was he couldn't speak French. He was sitting on the bench all alone, not to mention embarrassed. But music, it's the language of love. Play on. But Paul was in town, so he thought he'd make it on down to the Chat Key Pesh and order himself a round of the rarest wine, that is. But as so often happens in this world of travail and cheap wine, where the ridiculous becomes sublime, it's part of the great design. Your final reward is down at the end of the line. Because someone put the side on the box and a bird flew by chasing a fox, and a bird fluttered by. He sang a hipper melody from the sky. Bebop, bebop, ain't nothing like the sound of bebop. It's steady going on, and it don't never stop. That's right, bird fluttered by. He sang a hipper melody from the sky. Bebop, bebop, ain't nothing like the sound of bebop. Steady going on, and it don't never stop. Don't stop, etc.
Woo! Yeah.
I literally stumbled on that one day, and the key to it was a halftime shuffle. Because how do you play bebop changes over a rock beat? It doesn't work, because rock is really squared off, it's straight A's. And bebop is triplets, really. So it's difficult. But what I found was a halftime shuffle. The drum pattern on that thing was boom, bop, bop. So there's a lot of room for so it's got a lot of movement, and that was it. I was off after that. I started making this what I was selling. So now when I do gigs, I'll hang out on a chord and talk, and I've learned to develop this. This is what differentiates me. This is what I got. The Times in London once called me the world's only existential jazz rapper, because I talk about any, and I'll set up a pattern, man, and just go. I want you to cast your mind back 40,000 years. Back to the note when it first turned blue. Picture this. You're in a cave. Outside the wind is howling. Inside the people are doing that magic dance. I'm just bullshitting, and I'll do it with a great rhythm section, right? And a great soloist. And man, it's fun. It's fun for me, it's fun for the people, and it's truly improvisation. I mean, what I'm doing is improvised, nobody else is doing it. I'm improvising language like instrumentalists improvise solos. I have certain themes that I'm going to talk about. And when I get lucky, man, I get real lucky. And it's good. So I digress. I brought that up to talk about this Jewish thing. I had no intention of ever being a professional musician, let alone a Jewish professional musician. I got to LA, I got in the business, I got a record contract. I had to find out who I was and what it was that made me different. And I found out that this Jewish thing was important to me when my son was 5 years old, 6 years old, and I wanted him to have some sense of where he came from, and I didn't care about, I mean, I don't believe in God, so it's tough for me to promote Judaism. But it turns out that you don't have to believe in God to promote Judaism. It's very interesting that way. But anyway, I started doing this music. Well, here's one. And this is, it's funny because the first record I made for Blue Thumb, I was sitting in the studio fooling around. The engineer at the time was a guy named Bruce Botnick, and I was waiting for the other guys to show up, and I was playing this. Okay, and Botnick got on the topic and said, "What is that?"
Is that Eliyahu from My Leader Life?
That's Eliyahu from My Leader Life. My man. Wow. That's 40-some years ago. And I said, "Oh, man, it's this Hebrew song from the Passover service, and I'm playing it with a Ray Charles bass." That's the bass stop what I say, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah, and Botnick said, "That's great, man. We got to record it." And so, I mean, it was... 1993 is when I made the Jewish record, but that was 1972. Yeah, so it's 20 years before. And so the Jewish thing was there. I didn't avoid it, but I certainly wasn't going to exploit it. But then in 93, I made this record. It was called Life's a Lesson, because that was the one song that I had written on it. There were two of them, but anyway. And so it is a beautiful, beautiful record. Not because I made it, but I mean, it's a gorgeous record with all these people. Eddie Daniels, man, gorgeous, gorgeous players and beautiful tunes, and a wonderful singer who sang it with me, a woman who's a blues singer and everything. It was a great record. And at the time, I had my own little record label that was financed out of Japan, and I had distribution set up in Europe. And so I had a meeting with the Japanese guy and the...
It's the Go Jazz label.
It's Go Jazz, yeah. And Go Jazz eventually put out like 60 titles. It really did pretty good. But anyway, they liked the project, so they financed it. So this Jewish record was financed by the Axis powers, okay, by Germans and Japanese. Awesome. Swear to God. And I got this thing made, and I couldn't get it distributed in the United States. I mean, I couldn't give it away. I was looking to give it away. I couldn't. And I knew most of the guys at the record labels by then. And I knew they were Jews, and I knew who they were. And I went to every one of them, and I sent them copies. The CD existed. There it was. I had no distribution in the United States. And I sent it to everybody. Name them, Clive Davis, it doesn't matter. Some people like... Larry Rosen at GRP loved it. He said, "Man, this is really heroic." He wanted a couple extra copies for his wife's family, etc. Finally, Bob Krasnow said to me, "Look, man, I'll tell you why nobody's taken this record." He said, "Nobody's taken this record because we don't believe it's going to sell. Simple." I said, "Man, but you put out all this horrible gangster rap bullshit. You put it out." He said, "That's my point. I believe it's going to sell. If I put it out, I believe it's going to sell. That simple. We don't believe it's going to sell." So by coincidence, At that time, I was producing Mose Allison for Blue Note, and I was producing a record for Diana Ross. And CBS Sunday Morning, Charles Kuralt's show, got wind of the fact that here was this guy who was producing these records and had this little project and did this little service with this little Jewish group and couldn't get rid of it. And it went on CBS Sunday Morning. They did a...
And Dr. Billy Taylor was on there give you an introduction. I looked at the clip while I was...
It was probably Billy Taylor.
It was Billy Taylor.
It was Billy Taylor.
Yeah.
Well, and Billy's, you know, what a sweetheart. So, and then my phone started ringing and it didn't stop. And so, and the record didn't exist, except in Japan and Europe. So I had to wind up with boxes of Jewish CDs in my basement.
But it did sell.
And it sold and sold. It sold 30,000 copies. It would still sell. I just had to walk away from it. But I mean, you can still buy it. It's still out there. But I don't promote it. I don't go out and play Jewish gigs that much anymore. But it certainly goes back to what we were talking about in terms of owning yourself. You know, while I was wanting to distance myself from the Jewish community, I never could have made that. I never could have gone through what you had to go through to own. Yeah, I'm a Jew. Well, I grew up, man. I've heard about Jews. Yeah, I know. So it's very much what we're talking about. Finding out who you are, owning it, finding out what it means to you.
After reading the book, I was kind of wondering to myself, if there wasn't a moment where you regretted signing with Clive Davis and Arista as opposed to Mo Austin at Warner Brothers, where Michael Franks and Al Jarreau, who both enjoy the type of massive audience you deserve, was something not a million miles removed from what you were kind of doing?
Well, first of all, I was never invited by Mo Austin to join his label, so that's a moot point.
I mean, would this make a lot of sense for you to be on that label with those guys, Lenny Waronker, that whole kind of thing?
Second of all, I preceded Michael Franks by 7 or 8 years. I was doing it, you know. So I always thought of Michael as somebody who came out of the tradition that I came out of. I mean, again, for years I got compared to him. People would say, oh, yeah, you sound like Michael Franks. No, you know, it's interesting. Everybody's path is what their path is. I think it would have made sense if, under the right circumstances, I had recorded for Warner Brothers. I think it could have made a difference, but then...
If you recount that scene in Clive Davis's office in the book, and I'm just like, you have to think, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. Because, you know, in 1976, when Clive signed me, the slogan of Arista Records was "Where careers are launched," and he went out of his way to say, "This is a different kind of place. We're going to launch careers. We're going to stay with you. We're going to do this." And I had just come out of the Blue Thumb experience, where that was true. You know, it didn't matter, you know, how far out your ideas were. Okay, man, we signed you. That's what we're going to do. And to have Clive Davis say to me, you know, the problem with you is you just don't want to be famous bad enough. And I can't work with anybody like you.
Well, it's pretty rich coming from a guy who started Arista. The first people he signed were people like Gil Scott Heron, the headhunters, Anthony Braxton, and all.
Well, he didn't actually.
And then he turned right.
Yeah, well, here's the truth behind that. He had a guy named Steve Backer who signed Anthony Braxton, who in effect signed me, who signed the Brecker brothers, who just passed away. Clive, what he did is he came in, bought Bell Records, threw it away, kept Barry Manilow, who was on Bell Records, got that hit. Off he went. But all that hip stuff, I mean, you'd go into Clive's office and there'd be a big picture of Miles and a big picture of Janis Joplin and a big, you know, that was, I think, window dressing, because I never saw anything from that cat that suggested that he was moved by the music.
So
I just never did.
Actually, your quote from Clive about you didn't want to be famous enough, you talk about this in your book. Yeah, I think you're better known in Europe, maybe Japan, than here in the States. And so the question is, and you put it in your book, why aren't you more famous? And Mose Allison's quote was, "Just lucky, I guess."
That's one of my favorite quotes of all time.
Just lucky, I guess.
You know what? I honestly believe that now.
Tell us about that.
It took a long time to come to that. Why aren't you more famous? Just lucky, I I have a fantastic life that I invented. I had to invent it, man. It didn't exist.
Because you've lived in Madison for all these years.
Right. Which gave me a really nice stability in terms of my family, and it's an intellectual community. I get to hang with great people. And
Wisconsin.
Richard's there. I get to play with Richard all the time.
Clyde Stubblefield.
Clyde's there. Clyde, I get to play with Clyde. Roscoe Mitchell was there for years. And a lot of people come through, a lot of nice players. Frank Morgan spent a bunch of time there after he came out.
I was surprised to find that out about Madison. Like, I didn't really know that there was that much.
College town.
Yeah.
Not just a college town, a real lefty town. What happened was there was this thing about state universities. They were called land-grant universities. And Pennsylvania, like the Big Ten, essentially. And Wisconsin, because at the time the governor was Bob LaFollette, a very liberal guy, literally opened the door to New York Jews back in the 30s. And so Madison became a radical campus. And so you saw it flowering in the anti-war movement of the 60s, but you also saw it in the 50s with the development of this great history department with these great intellectuals who taught intellectual history and stuff. It was literally because Madison, as opposed to like Indiana and some of these schools, they kept their, the paranoia around them. For a while, Madison had the doors open, and so we had a lot of kids from Chicago, a lot of kids from New York, a lot of kids from all over the place.
Back to this Just Lucky, I guess, and how you came to grips with this feeling about fame and career.
Okay, so I like to say there's a difference between making a living and making a killing. And you talk about making a killing, it implies somebody's going to die. And a lot of people have surrendered a big part of their life to making a killing. It doesn't mean that when I was 23 years old, I didn't think that I'd be smart enough to handle $1 million at the time. But it didn't come up. So I was lucky in that, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, and I don't have a gig. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to try to write a book. I'm going to go out and play a gig. I'm going to go see what Richard's up to, right? The thing about money and that kind of success that people don't realize is how it separates you from your peers. I mean, look what happened to Herbie. As soon as everybody wanted to make Herbie's money, Herbie wasn't hanging out with anybody for a while. And it's the same thing with, in general, I can tell you this. One of the reasons Mose Allison is Van Morrison's hero, absolute hero, is because Van sees Mose as somebody who never cared that much about financial success. Mose only cared about the next gig, and it's true. All Mose cared about was what's the next gig, what's the next gig. And Van is a miserable human being with his own plane. And I think he sees the truth in what Mose said, just lucky, I guess.
Right.
I personally can't imagine a better outcome for myself. And part of my luck has to do with the fact that my wife, when we lived in Los Angeles, didn't like it. I always say, you ride the horse in the direction it's going, man. Don't fight it. And we moved to L.A., and I was just 1971. Art Mogul threw the bone, gave me a record deal, and he left Capitol 6 weeks later. Had nothing to do with me, man. He just walked out the door. It's incredible, really. So I made the record, and the record was coming out, and the PhD dissertation was just being published by Holt Reinhardt, a great publishing house. I had $10,000 in the bank, and in 1971, $10,000 was what you needed to live for a year.
And that book was Black Talk.
Black Talk. So
excellent book also. I highly recommend. Available widely on Amazon.
So I was the guy who took over from Art Mogul was a guy named Herb Belkin. And Herb called me in. He said, look, man, you're a good producer, and we'd like to have somebody like you here on staff. Would you consider it? I said, I don't know, like producing who? And he took the Capitol Records artist roster and handed it to me. He said, who would you like to produce? I said, Nancy Wilson. He said, I'll ask her. I went home. I said, you won't believe what just happened to me. And she said, my wife said to me, you won't believe what just happened to me. And what had happened to her is she was at a party with a pop singer who, when the pop singer discovered that she wasn't in the business, just kind of turned on her heel and walked away from her. And my wife said, who are these people in these tight leather pants who think they're so important, they're so special? They don't read books, they don't go to movies. Let's get out of here. And
Was that Rita Coolidge?
it was Rita Coolidge. That was Rita Coolidge. Rita Coolidge got me out of Hollywood and sent me back to Madison, Wisconsin. That's right.
Well, a chapter that you kind of skipped that I think in 1971 and when you went to Capitol, it wasn't so implausible that you would have had this big success, because the chapter you didn't mention about your introduction into the music business was when you were in England pursuing your PhD. You were recording there, and you happened to rub shoulders and work professionally with some pretty famous people like Charlie Watts and the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton. And so when you came to LA, it didn't seem so far-fetched. We weren't just a pure novice.
Recently I was, you know who this guy Mark Maron is?
Yeah.
I was a guest on Mark Maron's show. And at the end of the show, he said to me, I get it. You always wanted to be a cat. You didn't want to have an act. And that was it. Boy, he really summed it up. Really what I wanted to be from the beginning was a cat. I didn't want to have an act. And I was never any good at having an act. And just lucky, I guess, I was never forced back on my heels to have an act, because I would have been I was no good at it. I wanted to be a cat. I really only wanted one thing. I wanted the cats that I dug to dig me. I wanted the people I respected to respect me. I wanted to make enough money to pay the rent and have some food and have a good time. That's really all. And man, I'm 70 years old and I've had so many good times and made all these records and stuff. How could it possibly have worked out better?
30 records under your own name as a leader, right? Your own records?
34 now.
34, wow. It's like almost one a year or so.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I got another one coming.
It's incredible.
It's unbelievable. And these things just happen to me. I mean, I try my best not to write songs, and they keep coming.
What do you mean you tried and they keep coming? What does that mean?
I want to be done with this. I really want to be done with it. It's enough already. You make a song, oh my God, then you got to record it. Oh shit, then you record it, you got to put it out. Oh no, man, you got to put it out. You got to get people to play it. Oh, you got to hire a publicist. Oh man, you got to go get gigs. Oh shit, you got to get gigs. This guy won't hire you anymore. Somebody else, you got to go over here. You know, that all happens because you wrote this stupid song. If you stop writing the songs, you don't have. I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. So much of what I have to spend my time doing comes from inadvertently doing stuff I love to do, and then you're forced to, I mean, you don't have to, but of course you do have to. You do have to.
You gotta, yeah. That's, because I didn't bring my watch. What time is it? How much time do we have? Okay, we got a few more minutes.
Wow. You guys are heroes.
Yeah.
5:45, you've been here for an hour and 45 listening to this shit? Unbelievable.
I feel the richer for it.
Do you? Good. Just lucky.
Just lucky, I guess.
That's one thing I also wanted to ask you. In this book and elsewhere, you convey some really amazing but also stomach-turning stories about the ugly side of the industry and the music business and the capriciousness of it all. And that how, but you said also just a few minutes ago that how you react to things, that's your style and shows your character as a person. You've always seemed to maintain a equanimity and poise, even going through all these difficult experiences. How did you not just get completely sick of the business and just chuck it and do something else?
Well, I think my secret, if there was a secret, was that I always had a lot of interest, you know. And it was probably, in some ways, in terms of a career, a mistake, because if I did nothing but write songs and play piano, I think I would have been more successful in terms of the world judging me as a songwriter and piano player. But because I liked literature and because I read widely and I liked being in academic situations, although I hated school, but I liked talking about ideas and stuff. again, you know, I talked about how there's a narrative that we're all part of, and we all have a story that we're telling ourselves. And, you know, if you want to get deep about it, it goes back to your relationship to your family. It goes back to when you were a kid. And, you know, I say, well, gee, all I ever wanted was the people I respect to respect me. Well, that, obviously, the prime mover there is my father. I wanted my father to respect me. And my father was kind of a proto-hipster out of Poland, you know. I mean, he loved jazz, he loved reading, he loved but he loved baseball, and he loved all this stuff. So I think I was inculcated with the idea that there's a big world out there, and that, you know, you can be part of it, and that I also had this idea. It's kind of a crazy idea, but it came to me when I was a kid, and the idea was that in the world there are first-degree searchers, and what a first-degree searcher is somebody who's looking for some deeper truth, and that the first-degree searchers in the world don't identify themselves, and you never know who they are, and you'll never know if you're one of them either, but they have the obligation, if and when they meet each other, to help each other. It's my own personal little myth. And I kind of rode that for 60 years.
It seems to be working.
Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. The Jews have a tradition of you know, the lammets. That at all times in the world there are 12 men who are holding the pillars that hold the world up. You know, I personally, what I've learned is I'd much rather talk to a guy who loves to make a great pasta than somebody who's got his own airplane and, you know, is a big rock star. I got nothing to say to rock stars, really nothing. And it's not just rock stars. It's a mentality that it's not rock and roll. It's again, it goes back to the future's bright if what you're interested is in numbers. I got nothing to say to numbers, and numbers got nothing to say to me.
Wow. Do we have any questions while we have a few more minutes?
You mentioned that like there's going to be more money in the music industry.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Like, I feel like sort of the consensus is sort of the opposite, that the music industry is dead with all the, you know, the record company, you know, records don't, you know, nobody's
Well,
buying records.
as I told you at the beginning, you know, that song I wrote about love could have made a lot of money, but I never saw it. I couldn't collect it. Today, I get regular automatic payments, not just from Harry Fox, not just from iTunes, but from Sound Exchange, which didn't exist. In Europe, there's something called neighboring rights, which if you put records out, CDs out in a European country, there's a pool of money from internet sales that's divided. And so, whereas for years and years and years, I literally, and I think most musicians that I knew lived off of advances, right? I mean, the Brecker brothers told me that they never saw royalties. Advances was all you saw because of the way the business was set up, because everything was recouped out of your little 10%.
Or you had to stay on the road all the time.
Well, you had to
make
stay,
money.
you had to stay on the road. Back then, you know, the record company subsidized the gigs, so that put you on the road, but it really devalued your price, because I remember playing in Boston and at the nice club there. I was playing opposite George Benson. It was a great gig, but I found out the club owner only had to pay $125 to get me because the label had subsidized it, which means that the next time I wanted to go back to that club, they said, well, we got you for $125. So how am I going to ask for $500? So it was a slippery slope. It really was. That whole economic structure of the business worked great for a while, but it started coming apart a couple decades ago, man. It came apart when the record companies thought the audience was the enemy. When the record companies started suing people for Napster. What they should have done is Napster was a radio model. You know, it was just another way of broadcasting the music, and you know, we have a formula to get paid for radio play. And originally, the record companies wouldn't allow radio stations to play records. If you go back to the 20s, if you heard Ethel Waters singing her hit on the radio, she was live in the studio. Because the record companies wouldn't allow the records to be played, because they thought, well, if you could hear it for free, you won't buy it. Turned out just the opposite. If you heard it, you wanted to buy it. It was the same thing with Napster. If the companies had said, this is a radio model, let's set up some formula where we get, and we spread it around. But by that time, they were so desperate to control the distribution and the way the music went that they sued these kids. Oh my God. Well, of course, they shot themselves in the foot. So that part is gone. But the idea of getting paid, it's like a brand new world, for real. And never has it been more important, what I said before about differentiating yourself. You're not competing with anybody. It's not about who's better or who's worse. It's what's different. It's the most important thing now. It's really. So if you got something that's different, that's upbeat, because people don't want to hear the blues anymore. You know, it's too late for the blues. Be upbeat. You can do okay. Yeah, Jim.
The question I wanted to ask you have your own record company.
Well, I had a record company for a while. Now I just release my own records.
The sound exchange.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the split that we as artists get?
Well,
We're dealing with 50%, 45%, and us low artists get 5%.
right. I mean, obviously, it's a fraught question. Am I happy? I'm just happy to see something, man.
Oh, yes, that's indeed.
You know, you know, when Sound Exchange first showed up, was it 10, 15 years ago? I didn't know what it was, or, you know, but they reached out to me.
Yeah.
They said, we got some money for you, and blah, blah, blah. And so I've never been unhappy with them, but.
Well, I'm only speaking about that split, that the general musician on a recording is going to have to split 5%.
Yeah, I
As
know.
opposed to the featured artist getting 50%, the record company getting 45%.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's been this thing in front of Congress for a while now where everybody who's involved in the record is going to split some money if this passes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the split I'm talking about.
Yeah, right. This
The
is,
Sound Exchange is dealing with that.
right. No, of course that's not cool. I mean, of course it's not cool. But, you know, it's like we don't have a board of directors. There is no board of directors for musicians. We don't have lobbyists, really. It was funny. Recently, a very rich person gave a quarter of a billion, $250 million to the city of Madison to build an art center. You know, that's bigger than the entire National Endowment of the Arts. So it was way out of proportion. So I go to the guy who's in charge and I say, look, this is a great opportunity to make Madison a music city. And here's what we do. You take $100 million of that 250 and you build whatever you're going to build. And then you take the rest of the money and you put it in trust. And you go and you buy instruments in the high schools. And in this special building that you've got, you put a back door. And inside the back door, there's a special club for kids, but it looks like the Vanguard or something, see? But you just, you know, give them soft drinks and coffee. And you set it up with microphones, and you set it up with video cameras, so everybody who comes in there can walk with a DVD. And now everybody's interested, and everybody wants to come. And Winton will come, and whoever, you'll get them there. See, and eventually these kids will want to walk in the front door of the place, but let them in the back door so they're not intimidated. And, you know, I'm fantasizing just how much history you can move with that money. Well, you know they spent $250 million on this building, and they didn't set any money aside. And the people who designed the building, special, very special Italian marble on the floor. Turns out women with high heel shoes, when they walk on it, the floor chips. They got all this brass railings. Turns out it costs $20,000 a year to polish the brass railings. They don't have any money to polish the brass railings, right? So this is normal, you know. This is the edifice complex. I don't know what to say.
The edifice complex is a good one. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and we have to wrap up on time because we have a recital that's coming in here. But please, everybody, thank you very much, Ben Sidran.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.